Hello and welcome to the Off-Grid Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick. And today I'm really excited for my guest. He's a Marine Corps veteran, founder of Triple B Adventures, more recently, the Gray Man Project. He's been on many podcasts, national TV, and has been doing a lot of great things for military, law enforcement, and the first responder community. Brady Pesola, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, brother.
So one thing I always like to start off with is letting our audience get to know you by asking your origin story and how you got to where you are today. So I'll let you take it from here.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. And second, I'm going to give you a warning. It is the most bland origin story that is out there. There's nothing special about me.
Just like Superman.
I grew up in northern Minnesota. I joined the Marine Corps. I was a radio operator in artillery. We didn't do much. We did a lot of exercises, but never really got to get in the game, if you will. I did 4 years, got out, got recalled, went to Camp Pendleton, served a little time there as a base MP for about a year and a half. Not my favorite thing. And got out, went to college for a couple of years, got my degree, and then became a firearms instructor. And that's where I got my intro more into shooting and the tactical community. But I also started a survival school there in San Diego. And I use that term loosely. School was basically just people would find me on the internet and ask me to go out and teach them. And I'd set up groups. And for a long time, I ended up doing more land nav for folks going into selection for their various, special operations or SF or basic military. So set up a land nav course and did a lot of that. I did 4.5 years as a fire instructor, having a good time and teaching all various different folks, and same thing with the survival and disaster preparedness and having a lot of fun. And then around 2016, myself and a wonderful group of other veterans who are outdoor oriented had started a nonprofit taking veterans outdoors, hunting, hiking, camping, and fishing. And we had held events every month for a better part of 6 years before I stepped down to focus on my daughter, who's getting that age where it's like I had to make a decision. Am I going to be taking veterans outdoors every weekend and drinking with them and trying to solve their issues, or what little precious time I have, I need to spend with my daughter, teaching her the outdoors as well, getting her to understand outdoor education and survival and preparedness and things like that, get her in that mindset. And since 2016, I had left teaching firearms and started my path into personal security and executive protection, which I fell in love with and still do this day and have a great time with. And so around COVID, I started the Gray Man Project and trying to give a more pragmatic approach to preparedness. And we can talk about that later, why. And it developed into what it is now, talking about the utilization of philosophy to make you a better survivalist, a better prepper, and basically just trying to make people better at everything they do by using philosophy and understanding the mind and the brain.
Interesting. Just out of curiosity, did your degree have anything to do with what you're doing now?
No, but there were pieces of college that really inspired me. I've always been fascinated about humans, history, the mind, philosophy. And in one of my semesters, I decided to hand my ass to myself and take things like algebra, which for most people might say, oh, what are you talking about? That's not ass kicker. For me, it is. I suck at math. I'm horrific at it. But I also had taken cultural anthropology, biological anthropology, and philosophy, which really opened my eyes because the three interconnected a lot, because there's a lot to understand about culture and biological history of human beings to understand how we have evolved and survived. Even within our space and survival, there's a lesson between the survival of our anatomically modern human ancestors and Neanderthals who exist at the same time, as well as understanding cultures and understanding why people think the way they think, do the things they do within relation to their own psychology, their culture, as well as their morphology and the way they have adapted physically and evolved over time. And then philosophy was a great insight into all the different thoughts of all these different people throughout history to try and figure out who we are, why we are the way we are. And I just found it fascinating. And all three really inspired me from there. And it's funny in my philosophy class, I was a bit more arrogant and cocky, and I know I come off like that already. I'm very aware of my face. I've been called I have resting bee face, and then when I'm smiling, people think I'm up to something. But back then, I was a little bit more cocky, and
You seem like a nice guy to me.
I am a nice guy, but I can come off a little abrasive and obtuse sometimes, and I admit that and own that. But my philosophy teacher, she was so patient with me. And she was married to a gunnery sergeant, so I understand why she was patient with me. And every day she would contradict the lessons that she taught before in philosophy, and very contradictory. And I was like, hold on a second. You said this yesterday, and now you're saying this today. This doesn't make sense. And it was frustrating. And it took me literally half a semester to understand that she was teaching in the voice of that philosopher, and that philosopher had contradicted that other philosopher the day before and stuff. And so I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But that really tossed me in philosophy and really starting to understand a lot about us and who we are. And later on, I had discovered Stoicism when I was going through some emotional adversity, and I had seen a counselor, and my old man's the kind of guy where he says if you want things done right, you got to do it yourself. And having seen that counselor didn't do much for me, so I had to dig in into my own brain and into my own mind to really understand what was happening, why I was experiencing anxiety and going through certain levels of depression, and trying to troubleshoot the issue. And then I had found philosophy like Stoicism later on that really gave an insight into logic and reason, and I felt like it was a great tool to combat a lot of those physiological and psychological issues.
Let's dig into that a little bit for anyone who may not know. Give us a crash course on Stoicism.
Well, the first thing to know about Stoicism is there's some misattributions of what Stoicism really is, and oftentimes people think, well, it's a suppression of emotion. It's where you walk around and you don't feel emotion, you don't acknowledge emotion, you just are unfeeling. And physiologically, that's impossible. Stoicism has never been about suppression of emotion. It's about using logic to react well and rationally despite the emotional impulses you might feel. And we humans, we are impulsive creatures. There's nothing you can do to combat that. I mean, some people try with medication, but it's an unhealthy way to do that. The better way to do it, and that's what Stoicism helps, is to understand the emotions you are feeling, acknowledge them, but choose to react well despite them. It's acknowledging, well, I feel anxiety, but there's no utility in it. So what's the next thing I can do with anxiety? And are the actions I'm about to commit to, because of that anxiety, going to lead to a better outcome? And more often than not, that's not the case. In fact, we've been told our whole life, never make decisions on the influence of drugs and alcohol, driving a car, shooting a gun, things like that. And those affect our brain the same way emotions do. And here fallible human beings are often reacting under the influence of emotion. We're getting angry, we're getting upset, we get sad, and we do things because of those emotions. And we see it every day on social media. Someone becomes stimulated by political post, or someone says something, or we compare ourselves to other people. And Stoicism allows you to be able to recognize that and not act um, not act according to those emotional impulses. And Stoicism presses upon acting with virtue and rejecting pleasure. They say the path to virtue is the path to peace. Peace. Holy hell. Peace. The path to peace. Forgive me. They call it eudaimonia, which is a Stoic happiness. And the Stoics, their idea of peace is to act good, act well within reason, to use reason as your motivator for your actions. And that reason aligns with virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And they believe that if you act within those four virtues, you will find happiness and find peace. And that pleasure and vice leads to undesirable outcomes. It leads to more anxiety, more problems for you. And often case that's very true. Even anger, the release of anger is an act of pleasure, right? Because when we're built up and pent up with anger and we want to hit a wall or hit somebody or do something, we release that energy. And while that might feel great and relieving at that moment, we're now standing in front of someone who may not have deserved that, or standing there with someone who is a combatant, but now has a bloody nose, and now we have to face legal repercussions, because this isn't the 40s where you go out back and, or in the Marine Corps where you go to the tree line, drop your blouse and handle things. Now we have lawsuits, and now we have cancel culture. Now we have all these things. And so things like, seeking pleasure within drugs or pursuits of the flesh or with alcohol. These don't really oftentimes lead to great outcomes. In fact, they often hurt us and cause more anxiety and more emotional issues. So the idea is that if we reject pleasure and vice, and I'm not saying we reject pleasure completely, like, oh, I will never allow myself to enjoy these things. Even Seneca says that we should take walks outside and even drink, not to the point of intoxication, but to enjoy ourselves, not to drink because we feel a certain way, but to enjoy the pleasure and engage with others. But it's always in moderation. One of the virtues of Stoicism is temperance, moderation in all things we do, in what we eat and how we engage with others and how we drink and how we engage with pleasure. So moderation is there as a virtue to help temper a lot of those pleasures. But the idea is not to seek out pleasure, but to enjoy it as a byproduct of seeking virtue.
Now, is Stoicism something you stumbled upon when you were in college and then later on applied it? Or is it something that you came across just in your pursuit of knowledge later on?
It was just something that popped up on the old internet, just on the Instagrams, and there was a quote by Seneca the Younger, who said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than we do reality." And when you sit for a second there and think about exactly what that means and how many times that we've thought the worst in things, and then when the time came for this event that we feared to happen, it was actually not that bad. It was actually worse in our minds. And I thought about that and thought about all the anxiety, the things that were fueling my fears and these fears I had that down the road. And I thought back to other things that I thought about that would have been really bad and how it just worked out. And so I was like, wow, that simple, 4 lines. I was like, that's really profound. Who is this guy? Who is this Seneca the Younger? He sounds cool. And then went to study him, and then understood that a lot of his writings were based on Stoic philosophy. So of course I went down an ADHD fueled rabbit hole of what Stoicism was, and Greek history and Roman history, and found Zeno and Chrysippus and all these wonderful characters in our history, real life people that were trying to figure out how to live their best life and trying to understand who we are as humans. And there's 3 disciplines that they study: the physics, the logos, and ethics. And as they study those, they're trying to figure out the world around them and how to best act, ethically, and then understanding the logic behind everything. And I was like, yeah, I like that. And I've come to understand that there's a difference between academic philosophy and pragmatic philosophy. And academic philosophy, forgive me, just seems like a bunch of academics in college sitting and doing a circle jerk of reciting Descartes and Kant and Plato and Aristotle and Socrates. And then I looked at things like the Hellenistic philosophies of cynicism, skepticism, stoicism. They're more of a pragmatic approach to the world that we live in. Now, in fact, the Stoics, press upon and encourage simplicity and pragmatism within studying the philosophical doctrines, and the Stoic doctrines, but also to study other knowledge and incorporate it. There's a lot of overlap with cynicism and skepticism within Stoicism, and they cited other people like Diogenes. And even believe it or not, and here's where I get into a lot of trouble, is that there's a lot of overlap between Stoicism and Christianity.
Interesting. Before we get into that, I kind of want to go into, like what came first, your dive into Stoicism and all these different philosophical ways of thinking, or the Triple B Adventure program that you put together. Did one lead to the other? Like what was the catalyst for that? And how did you get inspired to start, reaching out and helping others who may be going through like a tough time in their own heads?
Yeah. So originally, like I said, I was dealing with some anxiety, and I call it emotional adversity. We always go through adversity one way or the other. Emotional adversity, anxiety, depression. We all go through that in our life. I call it emotional adversity. And so I had gone through that, and I was switching from firearms instructor to executive protection. A wonderful opportunity fell in my lap, and I took advantage of it. And it was around that same time I was leaving the firearms industry, which I had a wonderful time in, and met some wonderful people, and it from there has led me down some amazing paths and some amazing roads and meeting some people. And so during that same time, I had been studying a lot about psychology and physiology of the brain and psychology of the mind, and trying to really understand it. And that, of course, during that time, like 2016 era, there was these big moves within our veteran community, and a lot of people were trying to step away from the big corporate nonprofit veteran spaces, because they were starting to see corruption and all these different things that people were like, whoa, 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 how do we as veterans engage with other veterans and create these niches where we can help each other, but also help ourselves. And and I think all humans do this, and I think veterans as well, is that we try to run from our own issues by trying to help others. We think if we help others, that we're helping ourselves instead of directly addressing those issues. And so around 2016, myself and another good guy, actually he's quite common with off-grid recoil, had approached me about setting up an outdoor type of event. And we call it the Modern Mountain Man Rendezvous, where everyone come together. We liked the Mountain Man, and I was always a big fan of Jeremiah Johnson. I still watch that movie to the day. One of the best movies. Yeah. I tell all my bros, if you love the outdoors, if you're a man, you should watch Jeremiah Johnson. And I mean, heck, 1972 Robert Redford. If I could look like that, like, my God, how life would be different, right? Just a handsome guy, but and so we were like, okay, so what do? We put on this event, but we bring in elements of the old classical mountain man, the old original survival, where it wasn't just called survival, it was living, but a modern approach.
Sign me up.
No one has to show up and be in mountain man clothes and things, but we had all these people, these wonderful people who invited vendors and invited all these vendors out there. And a buddy of mine, runner, had this guy come up, and he said, I want to set up a mountain man. He set up this big teepee and dressed a mountain man. He's been a friend ever since, just a wonderful human being. And right there, it was that point where we met all these people, that all became our friends later on. And it was from a lot of these people, these veterans, that love the outdoors as much as we did, and saw the healing of it. And I had always this idea of what I wanted. I wanted to start this monthly group where a bunch of us veterans go out to the woods, and we go fishing, and we go camping, and we go hunting. And we spent time with each other in the presence of camaraderie, in the pine trees and called pine tree therapy, or we're out hanging out, just a bunch of bros around the campfire, veterans, drinking some liquid courage to be able to open up and talk about what's going on. And we talked about that for a while. And finally, I pulled the trigger around November 2016. We went out for a camp out in the desert in a place where I used to teach some folks and desert survival and stuff. And it was my favorite spot. And these people showed up, and then um, it was a good time. We sat around this campfire, and it was as I imagined. We sat around and talked and expressed things, and then veterans were networking around this campfire. And there wasn't a lot. I mean, there was like 10, 15 of us. And we had a financial attorney, ended up being our CFO, and wonderful guy. And this one dude's like, yeah, I got this debt issues that I'm dealing with. He's like, yeah, just come to my office Monday. And the networking started happening around the campfire, and people started expressing their issues. And people were like, I've been down that path. Let's talk offline, or let's meet up afterwards and talk more and see how I can help you. And other people, saying, I went through this and I can help you. And it was the networking there and the therapy and people realizing that there were other people out there with the same issues, that it didn't matter if you were combat vet, non-combat vet, Purple Heart, Special Forces, or Pogue like me. We all struggle with a certain level of adversity, that each one of us were on our own path down the road, that we were able to say, I'm a little bit farther than you down the path, and I've made it up here, and I'd like to help you up here as well and see what I can do to help you out. That networking happened, and people started just coming together and creating this network of veterans, and reaching out now more and more and more. And this wonderful, beautiful little community popped up from 2016 onward, and from other businesses and people. And we all just created this big veteran environment in San Diego. And it was great. And it was COVID kind of killed it. So for like about a good 2-3 years, it was this close community of having fun and events. And so I talked to the old guy. He's an old Italian Navy vet, and I always love his accent. And he was the CFO. And I said, hey, Ron, what would it take to make this a nonprofit? Because I could see he's going in debt, holding events every month. And what can we do to make it a nonprofit? He's like, oh, it's easy. And then he talked to some buddies of his and networks. And by February 2017 or March, I think, we got our 501c3, and we just started jamming from there, and bringing veterans outdoors. We had to camp out every month, and that was a high up tempo. And we had some great veterans and participated in all these other different organizations, and really tried to bring a lot of people together and have fun outdoors. We started turning the Mountain Man Rendezvous into our fundraising event, and had Rudy Reyes out a couple times. And if you've ever been around him, you'll never feel bad about yourself. That man will make you just feel like a wonderful human being all the time. And he's got that energy that just really, really just infects you in a good way. It just gets inside you, and you just feel good about being around him. And he came out as our guest expert a few times, our celebrity guest, and just wonderful. And so it was a good time. It really was. And they're still going at it today, still putting on trips, the guys and stuff. And every once in a while, I haven't been on a trip in years. I haven't had a chance to. It's just I don't have a lot of time. But they're still rocking and rolling and doing great things.
That's fantastic. And so I know you took a step back to focus on family, but how did you transition then into the Gray Man Project? And what's that all about?
Sure. So around 2020, I think, is when COVID started happening, and my Instagram channel was still San Diego School of Survival, and I was really passionate about disaster preparedness and survival, and even back when helping veterans out, the Stoicism had come when during that time with Triple B, and I started kind of talking about it around the campfires, and thinking about different ways that I can study it more and apply it. And one of my biggest things about survival isn't just the gear, the tools, the knowledge, the books. It's surviving this environment first, which is the first environment that will kill you before anything else will. This will lead to your death quicker than anything else. And so in COVID, I saw a lot of just a lot of fear from everybody. And I looked at disaster preparedness as such a relevant topic towards it. People were running out of supplies. People were locked in their houses. They're losing their jobs. And to me, preparedness was never just about the doomsday thing, or even at all, or about this image that Discovery Channel and History Channel and all these channels have put out about survival and about knowledge. I thought it was quite skewed and just more for entertainment. There wasn't an educational value to it. It was just a lot of fun to watch, but really um, not a lot of instruction. You pick up from it and you go, oh, okay, well, it's cold. I need to make a fire. Oh, very good. And they make a fire like this. Cool. But they didn't really break down. Okay, you got to have this base wood, this hardwood. You got to do this friction. Your shoulders are going to hurt. It wasn't really broken down. And some people, I think, really just had the skew. And so I wanted to create an entity on the old grams here um, of preparedness, but I didn't want to scare away a lot of people who saw preparedness as this dark, doomy, politically right kind of thing. I wanted it to just be more ubiquitous and universal, and people can look at it and go, yeah, you know what? It's good to prepare for things like COVID and things like losing my job or lack of resources. I mean, that's the original idea of preparedness anyway, right? And so, to me, the idea of gray man, now I'm not so much a fan of the idea anymore. It's become kind of a joke, and if I might be honest. But that being said, to me back then, the gray man was, born out of this idea of preparedness. But I thought it was a more softer, palatable, edible approach to preparedness, where it didn't sound too doomsday. It didn't sound anything like this. And I wanted to create content that was a lot about situational awareness, about your mental awareness, about simply just, hey, let's be smart about how we spend our money. Let's be smart about how we utilize resources. Let's put ourselves in a mindset that allows us to reduce the fear that we're experiencing in whatever this was, this virus that was going around the world, and that the media was like, we're gonna die. And so I was like, well, let's take a more pragmatic approach to this, and that's where I started incorporating the mental aspects of fear and our survival environments and preparedness, and then incorporating a little bit of philosophy, but talking about gear and talking about food and how to save money and what you can do. I mean, it was meant for even just the average person living in a condo in Los Angeles. That was the idea, and so the Gray Man was born. And over time, it's evolved, and I've gone away so much from like the tactical approach to things to more of the rational, pragmatic, philosophical, and the scientific way of understanding your mind and brain in a way that allows you to uh, survive better in everyday survival scenarios. Like we people spend money on books and classes on survival, and spend hours of watching YouTube videos on survival and preparedness on events that have a 0.01% chance of happening. Yet they know more about it than surviving everyday environments. Like, and 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 I break it down for people in a way like, take what you do every day in our urban environments and work, and let's break it down into environments, your relationship environments, which can be harmful to your brain and your mind, your work environments, your financial environments, the social media environments, political environments. And these are environments that we have to endure and we have to survive every day. And not a lot of people really create strategies or survival strategies to survive it. And when you allow these environments to infiltrate and degrade your brain, it leads to your demise. It leads to your drinking, your overeating, your drug use to try and combat the anxiety and depression that these environments get inside you and destroy in your own mental environment. And so that's what I like to focus on nowadays is how do you survive the environments that you live in now, that you face every single day. And I believe that understanding psychology and physiology and philosophy and these days theology helps really create a stable mental environment, so then you can better approach all these other environments around you like you would approach a wilderness environment or a jungle environment or whatever environment you're trying to survive that we prepare for.
How do you reach those audiences? I know you're talking about just surviving a walk down the street in, name whatever city, right? You're walking
Yeah.
to work, you're going from the parking lot to your car or whatever. I know there's a lot of people who are really passionate about teaching survival skills because it's empowering and it feels good to pass that along to other people. But do you find that those audiences, maybe in urban environments or maybe even out there in the middle of nowhere, do you find they're receptive to it? Like how do you get people excited to want to level up their self-reliance skills?
Um, I don't do a very good job at it. I just have my Instagram here, Instagram with my following there, and that's where I post a lot of my content. And I'm not very good at getting on these days with voice and video and speaking and talking to people. And I usually just post and then my long captions. But I mean, I try to do the best I can. I want to start a YouTube channel, and I was looking at like yesterday. I'm starting one. I'm working on a book right now, and it's 100,000 words in on mental and emotional survival because I'm passionate about wilderness survival. I live in the mountains, and I live in a cabin. I'm living the dream and then protecting people for a living. And while a lot of my old skills that I used to teach are valuable while I live up here, most people don't live in this kind of environment. And the idea of studying psychology and physiology and philosophy is boring. I've been described, in our circle, in our world of 2A and survival and preparedness and military and veteran and all these things, off-grid and recoil and tactical and these things. Those are the big juicy steaks on the plate. And I'm the soggy broccoli next to it that you don't want to eat, but you got to because it's part of the well-balanced
I
diet.
like broccoli. I don't know.
Yeah.
It tastes good to me.
So I approach the survival in that way because I look at folks that talk about the tactics and about the rifles and guns and CQB and going outside and using hatchets and axes and survival and building shelters and they're troubleshooting a situation they find themselves in. They're in a situation, and if their gun goes down, they know how to troubleshoot their gun. If their pistol goes down, they know how to troubleshoot their pistol. If their knife gets dull, they know how to sharpen that thing. They know how to use it. They know everything about surviving the environment, but they don't know how to troubleshoot their brain when it takes the proverbial dump. And that's what I'm trying to spread into our community is, hey, look, you can have all the cool gear in the world and have spent all the training in the world. You can be a super underwater ninja scuba sniper, Jedi SEAL, Ranger, Delta Force guy.
That sounds cool.
But unless you know how to, can I swear?
Yeah, do it.
Unless you know how to unfuck this environment, all that shit goes out the window. You need to know how to operate this environment, stabilize this environment. I tell folks, if you go to Starbucks and you can't handle the very fact that they fucked up your order without losing your shit, how do you think you're going to be able to survive starting a fire when your plane crashes or your car breaks down in the desert or you get lost on a hike? If they gave you 2% and you wanted scam and you lose your shit and get snarky, snippy and shitty with somebody at Starbucks, how are you going to deal with yourself when you can't start a fire right? And so I think it's more important these days now as well. Yes, study about survival. It's fun. That's part of the pleasure. That's part of getting knowledge. We love getting knowledge, right? We love learning how to start a fire. That's cool as shit. We love doing CQB and shooting and being accurate at the range and knowing this optic and knowing, this trigger and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, when you're facing situations that are really chaotic and your brain goes to this lowest level of training, they say, do you understand why that happens? Do you understand how you store information? Do you understand how to elicit your dopamine, your serotonin, your oxytocin, your endorphins when you feel anxious or when you feel like crap, when you're feeling down about something. Do you know what those chemicals are, how you get those chemicals? Do you understand why they're called reward chemicals? Because if you understand they're called reward chemicals and you go, oh, if I do something positive and constructive, I go work out, I engage in a good conversation, I go learn some knowledge, and my brain rewards me by saying, these are good things and these are healthy towards your body. And if you go do these things, we're going to give you more of it. And you go, yeah, I should do more of it. I should go more to the gym more often. I should eat more healthier foods, because if I do that, I feel good. And eventually my survival environment, my mental environment feels better. And I can tackle the life a little bit easier. I can tackle work a lot better because I'm more healthy here to survive and endure the environments that I face every day. Simple things is like waking up and not being on social media. That immediately starts disrupting your mental environment, starts putting you in a bad mood. And then one bad mood follows another. You start looking for bad shit, all traffic, and this person's putting on makeup, and oh, I'm late. And all of a sudden, at the end of the day, you've gone through the worst environment you've had to endure. And then what do you do when you get home at the end of the day? Try and fix this environment. You start taking the easy way, the path of least resistance, which we human beings love. And you start drinking or doing drugs, and you try and numb the anxiety. And you start to slowly kill yourself, which is funny. No one says anything about it. You're killing yourself. People are upset when you when you start a shotgun, or you hang yourself. People are upset about that, but no one's really upset about the difference in the immediate suicide and the long game of suicide, which people are doing these days by not eating right, not eating healthy, not taking care of their mind, not studying ways to survive their mental environment. And eventually they will die of kidney failure or cirrhosis of liver, or diabetes. You'll lose your foot. And there's going to be bigger problems, because if your identity as a husband and as a father is to be a protector and provider, and now you've become a medical liability for your family or a financial liability for your family, it's just going to get worse.
I've heard a statistic recently that 73% of Americans are overweight, and I think over 40% are considered obese. Do you think there's any hope for our society? Because, I mean, social media, man, that doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. And, neither does pick your fast food restaurant, or, any other of these delicious vices. Um, like, one, is there any hope? And two, for the people who do want to make a change for themselves, who may be listening and they're like, you know what, this guy's right, I got to do something to turn this around. What steps can they start taking?
Sure. First, I do have hope, and I want to make it very clear. I'm no psychologist. I don't have an ology or a PhD. I have a 2-year degree in police science. And keep in mind, I'm a fucking idiot. I just have a way of understanding things. That my ADHD, one of the things my ADHD allows me the ability to do is take complex issues and study it enough. And over repetition, I'm able to understand it, because, like I said, I am a fucking idiot.
I
Now,
wouldn't be so hard on yourself,
yeah,
man.
I'm no RFK Jr., but what I have been is a fallible human being, that and I've experienced my own emotional adversity, experienced drinking too much, and I quit last year. And I have been unhealthy and overweight, and I've understood what it has done to my mind, and done to my body, and just feeling like, if I'm supposed to be a protector and a husband, and a father, and I'm supposed to protect other people for a living, they got to look at me and go, yeah, this guy can protect me. Not, maybe if you could just sit in the car and just stay there and just be the driver, right? Like, it's like, oh, how embarrassing, right? I do believe there's hope. I think, not to make it political, I try and be as much of a rationalist and centrist as possible, to look at all sides of ideologies and politics, and pick from the good and understand it, and and try and be a voice of reason. But I think these days, um, I think there's the right people that are trying to fix things within our society, but no matter what way we vote, we have to start with ourselves. And that's the steps that people need to take, is stop relying on your government and the side of the politics, the side of the wing of the same bird that you voted for. Start relying on yourselves. That's why we call it self-reliance. And I think people need to start taking the steps to look at themselves and go, how can I be more mentally resilient? How can I be self-reliant? How can I be more socially independent, where um, I'm not doing things because society expects me to, or because my politics want me to, or because my parents said, or my friends do things. How can I step away from this hive mind of society that engages with no cognitive or rational function? Step away and say, I want to become my own person, and I want to think the things that I think that are healthy. And I want to eat the way I want to. I want to work out the way I want to. I want to look for good in society, and I want to think independently. I want to shed my biases and the indoctrinations that I have occurred over time through family or school or ideology or social media. And that's the other thing too, is to look at social media as what it is, as entertainment, and not, as Epictetus says, to fill your mind with mindless pap, but to be skeptical and to be discriminating about what you allow into your mind, and to look at information and go, does this information have a bias? What language is this person using? Oh, clearly this is an opinion, and we don't use opinion as fact, and we don't use biased language as credibility. And so there we begin to start to be more discriminating about the things that people say, even our friends that we agree with or the politics we align with. We start becoming more discriminating, going, is there an agenda behind this? And do I want to fall in line with this agenda? I want to think critically. And everyone thinks they think fucking critically. They do. Whether it's the left or the right or the center, whatever it is. But I think one of the biggest things that I find annoying and within myself and within society is this complete assurance that everyone thinks they're right and everyone else is wrong. And they don't leave room for nuance. They don't take into considerations of context or intent when they take in information. They don't allow themselves to think that I might be incorrect about this, or is there more I can understand and learn about this, or am I really that right and everybody else is fucking wrong? It's like, I have my arguments to the left and I have my arguments to the right. But I think both demonstrate, and myself included, and I want people to be understanding that I fully recognize I'm a fallible human being and I am wrong as well. I'm not sitting here from a place of perfection by any means whatsoever. But so I say this to include myself is I think we all experience a range or spectrum of Dunning-Kruger, if you've ever heard that term before. And for those who want to understand what Dunning-Kruger is, simply put, from my own brain and understanding of it, and it's going to be crude, but you know enough to think you're right, but not enough about a subject to know that you're fucking wrong, if that makes sense, and myself included. But I think the best steps to start creating a healthy mental environment is to start disengaging from things that you like so much and start questioning. And I'm not saying questioning yourself and spin into this mind of, is this the matrix? No, don't do that. But start asking yourself, are the things that I really think and believe truly healthy and the cause of my hostile mental environment? Do I feel anxiety? Do I feel depression because of things I think and feel and watch are affecting me in a way that I'm not being more discriminating, or I'm not questioning these things enough? And do I really want to be part of this crowd? And people oftentimes find themselves in a crowd and they're afraid to step away from the crowd, because the crowd and the hive mind is very much like, how dare you question us? And you see it within politics, you see it in political groups, that if you do step away, they use that, I don't know, they use that protest, that stepping away, as license to be an asshole to you. And that's something that you have to withstand. If you want to step away, if you want to separate yourself from the ideologies that you think are causing you problems, that are disrupting your mental environment, you have to accept that you will face criticism. You will face the ugliness of human nature. But as Stoicism teaches us, that We were born for one another, mankind, Marcus Aurelius says, and we must either learn to correct them gently or bear them and live with them and understand that people, you can't control the way people think. You can't control the way people act. But what's more important is how you act despite other people. Because it's not about what happens to you matters, it's about how you react that matters. Whether that is engaging in society or engaging in a survival environment where you found yourself, where something has happened to you. And it doesn't matter that you found yourself in a survival environment or a disaster environment. What matters most is what are the actions, the steps you take next that matters, that affect your survival, whether it's your mental survival or your physical survival. And I do believe that our society is hurting us these days. I think our society and the desire to be involved in social media and the media, to be popular, to have a voice. Everyone wants to have a voice. And I think that's hurting a lot of our minds and sacrificing our integrity and our dignity to want to be part of the crowd, to be part of giving a voice. And sometimes folks compete with one another. And so they say crazy shit and they start beginning to say things that don't make sense because it gets engagements and it works the algorithm. And the more engagements you get on something crazy, the more the algorithm pushes it out, the more follows you get, the more likes you get. And then when you're monetized, and I'm sorry, I'm going on another tangent here, but when you're
No, it's all good.
monetized, that almost encourages it. And you see it. You see it on social media that these loud voices get the most attention, but the rest of the voices right here in the middle where moderation is don't get that because they're boring. They're the vegetables on the side of the plate next to the juicy steak of hyperbole and outrage and all these things that people love to engage in. And so there, if we start taking the steps to really focus on ourselves and improve ourselves, we can then focus on society. And when I say social independence, I'm not talking about being a misanthrope and hating society and running away from it. I'm talking an affection, a literal, an actual affection, love for society. If you love the people around you, I say all the time, I hate civilization, but I love people individually. But if we really truly do love society and want to better our civilization the way we want to, we need to start with ourselves. We need to start improving ourselves and stepping away from the hive mind so that as we begin to improve ourselves, um, we step away from the hive mind and the hive mind weakens. And then all of a sudden you have these people pulling away and they go, yeah, I'm going to pull away from this ideology or these politics or this social group. And I am going to face criticism and I'm going to face adversity, but it's because it's on my terms and I want to, and you need to accept those things as reality and go, Epictetus. He's a smartass. He's a philosopher. He was a slave. And even Marcus Aurelius, who was an emperor, he was the last of the 5 great Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius, and he wrote this diary to himself, and that's what I love about it. It's this diary for himself, to be a good man, to live a good life, to be patient with people. He studied the works of a slave, which I think is cool. That's what's cool about Stoicism. And Epictetus, like I said, he was a smartass. And he said, when someone else has spoken ill of you, rather than make excuses for what is said, say, well, they are ignorant of my other faults. Otherwise, they wouldn't have mentioned these alone. Right? Saying is like, that's what they said. They must not know me that well then for them to say that stuff because holy shit, am I an idiot? You know what I mean? So, and I love that, and they say, don't worry about defending yourself. It only debases your character. Your first concern is that you are doing the right thing. You are following the virtues. You are being wise in what you are doing. You are accepting what you can't control and focusing on what you can. And the only thing that you can control in survival events or dealing with people is your emotions and your actions regarding those emotions. That's it. And if you can focus on your actions rationally and logically, you stand a better chance of achieving the outcome that you want. Whether you're in a gunfight, whether you're in a disaster event, whether you're in a physical combat environment, whether you are in the wilderness, lost somewhere, trying to figure out how to find your way back to safety. Being wise is focusing on what you can control. The next is courage. Courage is action in the face of adversity. It's going, this sucks, but I need to keep moving. I can't be stagnant. If I sit here and wallow my self-pity, I'm just going to create a worse mental environment. And the situation, the survival environment I'm in is not going to do me any good. It's going to kill me unless I stand up and face this adversity and do something logical in the face of this adversity. And the next virtue that the Stoics talk about is justice. Not so much the legal justice, or malum in se, or malum prohibitum. It's more about justice in the sense of how you interact with others. It's treating others with kindness, dignity, and respect, regardless of how they treat you. Not because it benefits them, but because that's what you're trying to find your own peace, is to act good and well. In Christianity, act Christly, regardless of how they treat you, because treating others like shit just doesn't really feel good for yourself. It might feel good for yourself, but then you have to ask yourself what kind of person you are. And trust me, look, I get into arguments with people on social media here and there, and I have said things that I'm not proud of and that I would love to take back, because I have succumbed to my lesser human instincts, my limbic system, which I think is important. People understand the difference between your limbic system and your cerebral cortex, your rational brain. Um, but treating others with kindness, dignity, and respect, I think, is a mark of a person with good character, regardless of how they treat you. And then finally, temperance. I think that's a big virtue that I think people can utilize to help themselves and take the steps necessary to improve themselves, is to take moderation in everything, a moderate stance, moderation in what you eat, and moderation in how you engage with others, moderation in your alcohol intake and your diet. Moderation in all things allows, they say, moderation in everything, right? So I don't think it's a bad thing. And so I believe, following the four virtues of Stoicism, which coincidentally enough are the same virtues you might find in Christianity, or the path to good, to choose reason, to act more rational, I think allows us the ability to improve ourselves and find peace in that eudaimonia that the Stoics talk about.
So I don't think we've ever discussed religion on my podcast yet. Full disclosure, I'm very deep in the pool of cynicism and skepticism. I guess I would say I'm more agnostic,
Sure.
than
You,
following an ideology. I'm totally open, right? There could be a God. There could be. I'm not ruling it out. I'm not saying there's no way it never exists, but that's just where I am on the spectrum. Um, you're talking about how, like, Christianity, and the values that they teach align with Stoicism, and just go into that a little bit, and let's talk about how you feel that that's a beneficial thing for people to either learn about or get involved with.
sure. It's funny. I was an agnostic for a long time when I started Stoicism. And this is where I might lose some of your followers, or you might get some interesting comments. And I've had arguments with Christians and some of my friends that are Christians, because I study Stoicism, and they don't feel that I need to study Stoicism, that I should be able to rely on the words of Jesus and God. And I agree and disagree. When people say they're agnostic, I think I liked it most. There was a term that was used in a movie called Hot Fuzz, where they said, "Are you a Christian?" He goes, "Agnostic." And they're like, "What is that?" He's like, "I like the idea of God. I'm just not quite convinced." Right? So you're there, and you like the idea of God. You've heard about God and the wonderful things. And who doesn't like the idea of God? There's this idea that there's this wonderful creature who created all of us and loves us, and who doesn't want to be loved. Um, and growing up, I was always jealous of people who were born with what I call the gift of faith. I think faith is just a wonderful gift, that people can have this ability to just not worry because they know that God has their back. It's just amazing strength that these people have. And I see these people, and they just got not a fear in the world. They love life. And I look at that, and I am like, fuck, I'm jealous. Like, how do you just live life that just happy and go lucky? And it's not that it's ignorance, because I think people use ignorance as such a pejorative that if you believe in God or the sky daddy, I don't feel it's necessary to mock these people. I really envy it. I tell people I was born with the burden of doubt, and I consider myself a Christian now, and I know other Christians might not agree, but that's not them for them to say I'm whether or not. I will face judgment one day, and God will tell me how He feels about my path that I feel that He's given me, and I feel He said about my path to work a little bit harder to find my way back to Him. I didn't grow up religious, though I was baptized after boot camp. My mother wanted to make sure that I was baptized, and I was baptized by this Methodist Filipino priest who survived the Bataan Death March. Yeah, he's a wonderful human being. But even then, I always, I'm Finnish. I grew up in northern Minnesota, and a lot of people up there that's Finnish or Scandinavian are Lutheran, and most of my family was Lutheran, but there wasn't ever really a heavy influence of religion. I'd gone to Sunday school, and some of my relatives were very religious, but I always understood there was God, but I just never really got into it. Never really read the Bible or anything like that. And so throughout my life, I always found it easy to sit there like everyone else does and say, well, if God exists, why is there evil? Why is there bad? Why is there evil in this world? And how can people die of cancer? And why do these kids get hurt? And why do these things happen? How can God allow this to happen? And as I began studying Stoicism, which the Stoics themselves believed in their respective gods, they said the universe, but they also use the term logos, which is what Christians use to interpret its Greek word, and they use it as the word, the word of God, and that's if you study Stoicism and you are a Christian, you will find a lot of overlap. In fact. Seneca the Younger's biological brother is a man named Gallio, who is a biblical figure, but he's also an extra biblical figure. He was a prefect consul, I think, between 51 and 52 A.D. In an area, and the Jews brought Paul, the apostle, also known as Saul. He was a Pharisee himself, but once he loved fucking up Christians. And then on the way to Damascus, he became blind, and Jesus revealed himself to him, and he became a Christian to spread the word of God. And well, the area that he was in, the Jews didn't like that at all. And they brought him before Gallio, and Gallio refused to prosecute him. He was like, this is your problem, not mine. And you guys fucking get out of there. Well, Gallio, it was Seneca the Younger's biological brother, and Seneca the Younger was a well-known Stoic who was an advisor to Nero, who eventually happened to commit suicide because Nero was batshit crazy. But that being said, there is a lot of overlap between Stoicism and Christianity within a lot of the principles and methodologies and thoughts and ideas. The differences with Stoicism and Stoics rely more on themselves and logic and reason, and Christians believe that they need to rely on Christ for their salvation. So Stoicism focuses on being a good person here and finding peace here, and Christianity focuses on finding eternal happiness. And it was Stoicism that, believe it or not, allowed me to find my way back to God, because I was using Stoic logic and understanding the world and the universe and God, and then getting into Christianity and studying into it. And it's where I found a guy by the name of Thomas Aquinas, Saint Aquinas, who was a major figure within Catholicism. And this allowed me to reconcile a lot with my idea of science and knowledge and rational thought and rational knowledge. And it was Aquinas who introduced the idea that to be a person of reason brings you closer to God, because God is a rational creature. And because we human beings possess the faculty for reason, biologically and literally, that we possess a share in the divine with God, even as the Stoics say. And so it's that rationality that I looked at and go, you look at science and medicine and mathematics and philosophy, it's all rational knowledge. And as far as I'm concerned, a gift from God as a tool for us human beings to flourish. And it was Aquinas who said that he believed that there is natural law that God designed, and then there is his divine law. And it's a divine law that helps with the natural law, that he said he put into place the parameters of things like physics and gravity and how we human beings interact with the creation that he created. The way I like to explain my idea and what I believe is that you ever played the game Red Dead Redemption?
I am aware of that game. Yes. Yeah.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of my favorite. I waited 10 years for that game to come back out. And it was an expensive game because I bought a PlayStation 4 to play. So it ended up being a $400 game instead of a $40 game. The way Red Dead Redemption in open world games, and I'll say it more of like a open world game, is you have a programmer, and this programmer sets into place these parameters, these physical laws, where this character can wander around this world and do all these things, but there are certain things they can't do. They can't float, they can't fly, depending on the game. Sticking with Red Dead Redemption, and this programmer creates all these different rules within the game that this character has to follow within that, within the programming, right? And there's always an end mission, but within this open world game, you can do side missions, but you always have to end the game. There's always, all these side missions lead to the end of the game. And in Red Dead Redemption, you always have this choice of how you're going to interact with the NPCs. And how you react with those NPCs, the game gives you more honor or less honor. You know, when you're confronted with somebody with this moral dilemma the character faces, you can, and the game gives you these choices to act immorally, kill a son of a bitch, or shoot him, or drag him across a desert, which you can do in that game. You can tie somebody up and drag them like they did in the Old West, or you can help that person. Even there are criminals that come up to you in the game and ask for help, and you have to decide whether you're going to help them or not. And sometimes it was someone innocent, and you got higher honor. And the cool thing about that game is at the end of the game, it's rumored that if you have low honor, the way the game ends is different from if you had high honor and how it ended. But Arthur was always in this moral dilemma. He had a good heart. He was always trying to do the right thing. And he was inherently bad, though. He ran with his game. And it reminds me of Original Sin. And you always have your choice on how you're going to interact with things. You have the ability to choose. Within this game, you have free will. But the game has to end, and you always have to follow the path of the game, regardless of all these side missions that you incur and encounter that are set up for you within this open world. And I apply the same idea to my relationship with God and Christ, is that this open world game that I live in will end eventually, and all these different missions and side missions and activities are set up for me. And they might enhance my path, or they might slow me down a little bit, but eventually I will follow this path. And again, I will end it eventually later on in life, or sooner or later, or whatever. But I will have to answer for all the things that I have done. But along with Thomas Aquinas, I feel that we are given our choices within the natural law that God has allowed us, and things will happen within this natural world that He has allowed us the opportunity to try and problem solve for ourselves through giving us the tools of reason, through knowledge, through mathematics, through science, through philosophy, to look at all these different knowledges and use it to help us flourish and to become better human beings for ourselves, and allow us an opportunity to give us a brain that we have evolved to pick and choose goodness and reason, or to falter to our primitive instincts of pursuing pleasure, leading to acts of evil and bad, if that makes sense. I don't know if any of that, and I know I'm going to lose some people on this last one.
No, I think it's a good and interesting subject to talk about and discuss. I'm curious to know what you think about the theory that, you know, we're in a simulation, we're in a simulated open world.
It's interesting. It's one of those fun late night laying in bed with a screen in front of your face ADHD rabbit holes that we all want to dive down, and we start hitting blue and purple links on Wikipedia to go down and research and YouTube things. And I think even Elon Musk had said that we have a 50% chance of whether we are in base reality or if we are in a simulation. And it's a fun thing to think about. And sometimes in my head, I do wonder, I do falter, and wonder if we aren't in a Sims game, being fucked with a little bit, being played with a little bit. But I think, you know, if we look at the course of human history and how weird things have been, and the things that we human beings have experienced or done or been a part of, or just the course of human events, stranger things in our history have happened than they are now. We just have the ability to see it more. We have better optics because of social media and because of technology. We now things are more visible to us. It's kind of like these days when everyone keeps seeing plane crashes, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's a lot of planes crashing. Is it because there was a layoff in the FAA and Federal Administration? Well, if you look at it, we've actually had more plane crashes last year than we had now, but we have a bias where we see things more often than we used to because it's presented to us more often within our algorithm, with our social media. And so when people sit there and say things are this weird, we are in a simulation. I don't think so. I think things have been weirder. I really do. So I don't know. It's interesting. I love reading about it. I love looking at it and going, but it almost makes you wonder though, now if we are under a simulation, do we really truly have control? And that's the same argument we might have with God and free will, is do we really have control, or do we have this parameters that these programmers have set up that we can act and interact and grow and flourish, and they're watching us grow, and every once in a while like to throw a little wrench in the gears for humankind, you know, like, you guys are doing really well, and you guys are really weird. Here's some COVID. Here's some Tiger King. And you know what? Let's throw some political divisiveness in. Let's have some fun. Let's see what you idiots do. You know, and we're like, gee, thanks. I don't know. It's weird, but I don't think we should ever push anything past the weirdness that is human nature. And human nature, the human condition, is, I think, the biggest disease we suffer from. And to which there is no cure. There's only constant treatment, and that treatment is the constant study of ourselves, the improvement of ourselves, whether that is choosing the path of spirituality or choosing the path of philosophy. Either way, we have been given tools of free will by either God or the programmers in this crazy ass simulation. And from there, we can't control that. The only thing we control is how we react to it. And therein lies still the fundamental principle of being able to study ourselves and act within reason, regardless of what happens around us.
You mentioned something a while back about the difference between your limbic system and, did you say, your cerebral cortex?
Yeah. And this is an oversimplification of my understanding of things. And I know there are more systems and anatomy into place. But one of the biggest things that help me really understand when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to skills, when it comes to training, when it comes to troubleshooting the mind, is really understanding the fundamental difference and the structures within our brain. And the one area that we human beings tend to lean on more, and it's no fault of our own, is our limbic system. And the limbic system, and this is where it's important to understand your brain, why you understand the way things happen. Our limbic system is responsible for our emotions and our reaction, our behavior. And the end structure in our brain that we tend to react from is our amygdala. It is a part of our brain responsible for our behavior, but it's also responsible for our trauma, our training. It's where PTSD is stored, but it's also where our second nature is stored. It's where I'll call it for now, muscle memory is stored. It's actually called procedural memory and implicit memory. And I always love the tactical communities. All these tactards now are these gun influencers and tactical influencers say, there's no such thing as muscle memory. It's like, well, yes and no. They just don't understand why they're kind of right, but also kind of wrong. Muscle memory is just an oversimplification for procedural memory. It's transferring memory from our contextual memory, which is stored in our hippocampus. Our hippocampus is where we store names, faces, dates, and new skills. So when we're drawing a firearm, we're teaching someone to draw a firearm. They're thinking to ourselves, we're putting into their brain saying, okay, we're going to grab our pistol. There's a threat. We're going to draw. We're going to come together. We're going to point out. We're going to have grip, stance, true, total, silent, eyesight, picture. And then eventually, the more and more we do that through repetition, so that's called procedural memory. In procedure, constantly doing that, it now becomes second nature. So now when you hear threat, your amygdala goes, oh, I know what we do when there's a threat or there's something going on. It stimulates our reaction. We grab our firearm and we go without thinking twice about it. And now we're here. And now we're actually able to use our cognitive brain, our rational brain, to decide whether this thing is truly we need to engage with lethal intent or we need to just hold our pistol and give commands, and what commands we give. So this is an important thing I think people don't understand and need to study. Is there are two routes that information takes in our brain. There's what's called the short road and there's the long road. And I forgot the doctor that created it, something French, Dr. Ledoux or something like that. There's an X in his name or something like that. And he had come up with this understanding, this theory, and it's been widely, and I would say theory, it's been a proven scientific structure and process within the brain. It's called the neural pathways. So your thalamus takes in information and then it sends that information in two ways. The first way is from your thalamus to your amygdala. So to give an example or a physical example that we all experience is when someone comes up behind you and scares you, what's the first thing you do? You either turn around, you get into a fight stance, or you get into a surrender stance, right? The fight stance is more trained, and that's through martial arts and training and things like that.
I was going to say, I automatically do a backhand immediately wherever they are.
Yeah. You're ready to, like the movies. All right, didn't see you, next guy, right? But you get into, if someone scares you, get into a defensive stance. And you're ready there. That's your thalamus sending information to your amygdala and preparing you for your next action. It's going bam, bam, holy shit. Now at the same time, and just a hair slower, that information then takes the long road. I call it the logic road. And it goes to your sensory cortex. Your sensory cortex is your sight, your hearing, your taste, your touch, but not your smell. Your olfactory is connected right to your amygdala. That's why when people smell something like cookies or perfume or shampoo, it immediately elicits an emotional response. You're like, oh, that brings me back, or something like that. It evokes an emotion out of you. Your olfactory is attached right to your amygdala. That's crazy. And then so that information, so you turn around, that information, it's like, oh, I'm recognizing who it is now. And so that information is going to your hippocampus, the contextual memory. So your eye takes the information because it went through sensory cortex. And you're like, oh, and then your hippocampus goes, oh, that's my buddy. Oh, you mother, like, oh, you scare me. And now your information is now going through, at the same time it goes through your hippocampus, it goes into your prefrontal cortex, your cerebral cortex. And that is responsible for higher cognitive thought of your of your thinking, of your brain. So you have your limbic system and you have your prefrontal cortex, and they're always in constant battle. And so Stoicism is and I'll say it here, I'll continue on to what I was saying. I'll say before I forget, but Stoicism is a rational practice of your cerebral cortex to combat your limbic response to external stimulus, if that makes sense. And so now the contextual memory is coming closer, and it's going into your rational brain. Your rational brain goes, I could still get away with popping this son of a bitch in the face, but I'm not going to. So you made the rational decision. Even though you're in a stance, you've made the rational decision not to engage with your buddy. Or you might punch him. You just might I'm making the cognitive decision to punch this guy. But the cool thing about that long road is that is a very helpful part of our brain because it does go through the cerebral cortex. It does give us the ability for rational thought to react rationally despite the stimulus. We can choose our response. There was an old guy named, back in World War II, he was through Auschwitz. His name was Viktor Frankl, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which if any of those out there, veterans or folks out there are having a hard time just finding meaning in their life, one thing he did say is that man ceases to struggle when he finds meaning in his struggle. And taking the struggle that you have and finding meaning, it can help you. But he did say, which is my favorite, is that between stimulus and response, like we just talked about, stimulus and response, thalamus to amygdala, there's space. That's the high road. And in that space, we have the power to choose our response. And in the power to choose our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so there, we don't always have to react to the stimulus, right? Unless it's life or death. But when think of like when someone says something to you, or someone does something, or you witness something in front of you, or you are in a situation where there's a survival element to it, you have and possess the physiological ability to choose how quickly you want to respond to things. You don't have to respond immediately. You can spend a second, a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a month, a year before you respond to something that originally caused you distress. And it's over that time, if you start practicing this more often, like if someone drives by and cuts you off and you're like, I'm going to flip it. I don't have to do that. I don't have to respond at all. Nothing, nowhere does it say it's written down or anything. Do you ever have to respond immediately to something that you perceive is adverse? You can take your time, and by the time that you decide to respond, you might even decide that there's no reason to respond for it. And that logic and reason has taken over. Emotion was your driving force. And that reason and logic might say, well, I can choose a different response now by giving yourself that space. Or you might decide that you don't need to respond, period. And there's no utility in it. And whatever someone said or did to you doesn't require a response, because if you ever feel like you have to respond to somebody, that's them getting inside your brain. That's them now controlling your actions. And we don't want that. The palette of human emotion is quite colorful. And that colorful palette of human emotion paints a picture of your actions. And when someone upsets you and you react to their words or their actions, you're handing them the brush to paint a color, to paint a picture of the actions that you probably not going to like. So rather than hand the brush to them, paint a picture of your own actions by controlling your own emotions and your own response to what has happened, whether it's a post you see on the internet. So it's, people don't realize how easily manipulated they are by social media, because what people do, what the algorithms decide to do, and this is where we come into AI. AI is designed to promote high engagements. And oftentimes we don't agree with the content that possesses that high engagement. And the algorithm doesn't care. It just says there's lots of comments, likes, and shares. And so we're going to put it in your feed. And sometimes that content can elicit an emotional response and might make you angry. And so what do? You like, comment, and share. You have now participated in the original intent. And let's say that that content was put out by the media. The media doesn't care how you respond, just as long as you respond. And if you push that content out, now you've engaged in sharing that content and in their ad revenue. And now you've made money for them because now they've monetized off your emotions to that subject.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, it really sounds like social media algorithms are really manipulating our lower brain functions.
100%. You are reacting under the influence of emotion. Your thalamus takes in that information and it goes right to your amygdala because something had pissed you off, whether Orange Man bad or socialist said something mean, whatever it was, and you immediately have an opinion on it that's stored within your amygdala, and you feel the necessary desire to express it because fuck you, you're wrong and I'm right. And now you've allowed your limbic brain, your primitive brain to engage and make a comment that if you spent just a couple more seconds thinking about, you don't really have to make. Or you might say, well, I disagree with that person, but I can't control what they say. I'm not going to change their fucking minds. I'm just going to waste my time saying this. So, no, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to add ad revenue. I'm not going to engage with his algorithm. I have a choice. When people talk about the fearing AI, it's not AI that you have to fear. AI is irrelevant. It's how people utilize AI. It's how humans take and use that tool to get what they want out of you. They're going to stimulate your emotional response. And we human beings, we still, unfortunately, are subject to our lesser impulses, our lesser emotions. But the more we practice, and I think people with who carry guns actually practice this more often because we realize that if we're concealed carrying, we now have to maintain the utmost moral, ethical, legal superiority and authority. So I can't escalate a situation and drive myself into a spot where I have to use my firearm because this guy flipped me off and I flipped him off. And then he said, pull over the side of the road. And my ego and my pride and my anger got the best of me and I engaged. And he pulls out a bat and then I fire around at him. Well, guess what? I allow my emotions to get me involved in a situation where I escalated because of my pride and my emotions. I let another person take a hold of that paintbrush and paint a picture of my actions that now I have to deal with civil and legal consequences with. And so, yeah, I think social media is manipulating our emotions. And the more that we understand our mind, our brain, how it works, the functions, the structures, and using philosophy, we can begin to combat that tactically, strategically, politically, personally. And so that's why I think taking some of the sciences, as Thomas Aquinas puts it, is the philosophical sciences, we can then begin to learn to survive a lot better. We can begin to operate, within the military, law enforcement, as EP professionals. We can begin to operate better, strategically, tactically, by choosing our response more effectively than succumbing to our lesser instincts. And there I think we're going to find better human beings, better survivalists, better preppers, better tacticians, whatever it is that you pursue. If you begin to really study yourself, how you react, and learn to troubleshoot the important parts of your brain, you're going to be better personally, professionally, and socially, I think. There's a tactical, basically I'm saying, there's a tactical advantage to being a nerd, if you will.
I really love the analogy of the paintbrush. It's and being in control of your own paintbrush and palette. That's a really good message.
Thank you.
I've got two questions left for you.
Sure.
The first one, if anybody wants to look up what you're doing, where can they find you?
Oh, I'm easy to find. Right on the old Instagrams under grayman.project, which I debate back and forth when I change it these days. The gray man is this joke of an idea that's kind of evolved weirdly, and it's funny. People like to poke at me as they do on the internet and say, "You having 100-some thousand followers doesn't make you really the gray man." I'm like, on the contrary, how many people when you walk into Starbucks are actually paying attention to who the fuck you are? Most people don't give a shit who you are. They are in their phones or looking at yoga pants or looking this way or whatever. They're not paying attention to anything. They're in constant situational awareness condition white all the time. Trust me. The only time anyone's ever recognized me from social media is people within my own industry, another EP agent going, "Hey, bro, oh, cool. It's nice to work with you." And that's about it. People, I think, oversimplify the gray man as this idea of not dressing tactical. Instead, they should be looking at should I dress via the context of the environment that I'm putting myself into. And I talk about that sometimes, but I don't know. People always say, "No, you're the gray man now," and you stick with that, and that's how people know you. I've always wanted to change it into something else, and I'm like, oh, I just want to get away from it now. But people are like, "Nope, you're the gray man. You are Gray Man Project, and you will fucking stay that way, whether you like it or not." It's like, fine, fair enough. So find me on the old Instagram. I am looking to start a YouTube channel called. Well, I want to call it the Voice of Reason, but someone else has it. It's a guy who makes Catholic content, so I'm going to call it the Rational Voice. And what I want to do is just take a lot of the things that are happening within either the veteran space or the tactical space or the prepper space or even the social, political, or relationship, and give it a rational voice of saying, "Hey, everyone's going to have their own thoughts, but what if we look at it this way?" And ask ourselves, is the way that we're really thinking the correct way, or what is the correct way? Or is there a middle ground to this? I look at how the politics were within COVID or politics, and I always try and struggle. And I admittedly, I'm center right, but I try and stay center, and they call me a fence sitter. And I'm like, I will sit on my fence and drink my coffee while you guys shit on the green grass you're sitting on. And I think that's where the Stoicism helps me, is trying to find moderation in everything, finding balance. I think it's important to do that. And I think there's always a middle ground and a rational explanation in everything. And I see a lot within the conspiracy theories, I see a lot within the left and the right. And it's like, have you guys ever thought that maybe there's a different explanation, a rational explanation than the emotions that you're using to view the emotional lens you're viewing this through. So, but find me on Instagram, the Grayman, GRAYMAN.project. And that's where you can find me until I start uploading videos to YouTube.
Sounds good.
Easy peasy.
My last question, if you could take all of your knowledge and experience and condense it into one golden nugget of survival wisdom, what would that be?
Your brain will kill you first before everything else does. So learn to survive your mind before you attempt to try and survive anything else. Your mind will keep you alive better than your skills, your equipment, and all the information you've ever had. So the moment you learn to unfuck this is the moment you learn to unfuck everything else.
Perfect. Brady, thank you so much for being on. I'd have you back anytime.
Thank you so much, brother.